Ever get that feeling, that maybe what we experience as reality, this solid, tangible world, is just one layer of something far more expansive, almost unimaginable?
Yeah, like our everyday senses are only giving us a tiny sliver of the whole picture.
Exactly. It's that sense that there might be more going on than meets the eye.
It's a really deep human intuition, I think. Something thinkers have wrestled with forever.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the kind of, mind-bending territory we're diving into today on the deep dive.
Our mission, as always, is to tackle something complex, something fascinating.
Unpack its core ideas and give you, our listener, a real shortcut to being in the know.
Hopefully sparking some genuine aha moments along the way, right?
That's the goal. And today, we're taking on a truly ambitious piece of work. David Deutsch's The Fabric of Reality.
Yes. Definitely not light reading, that one.
No way. I mean, Deutsch sets out to build a complete picture of reality using our deepest scientific theories. It's incredibly bold.
Trying to connect fields that seem, totally separate, to find this unified understanding of, well, everything.
Right. And your goal, listening in, is really to grasp the central arguments, see how they all kind of interlock.
And get a feel for his pretty revolutionary view of the universe without, hopefully, feeling completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, without your brain doing mental gymnastics.
So to help navigate this, it helps that Deutsch himself organizes his ideas around 4 fundamental strands of explanation.
Okay, like building blocks for his worldview.
Exactly. Think of them as the pillars supporting his whole structure.
All right, let's lay them out. What are these 4 key strains we need to get our heads around?
Okay, first up, and maybe the most startling for many, is quantum physics.
Right.
Specifically, the many worlds interpretation that Hugh Everett came up with.
Many worlds.
Yeah, and for Deutsch, this isn't just like one possible way to look at quantum mechanics. He argues it's the literal implication of the theory. It leads directly to the multiverse.
The multiverse. Wow. Okay, so the idea that every quantum event splits reality. That's huge right off the bat.
It is. It's foundational for him. So that's strand 1. Strand 2 is epistemology.
How we know things.
Exactly. And here, he leans heavily on Karl Popper. The core idea is that knowledge grows through conjecture and refutation.
Conjecture and refutation, meaning?
You propose bold explanations, conjectures, and then you try really, really hard to tear them down refutation. It's about the power of explanation, not just, say, prediction.
So put your best idea out there and then actively try to prove it wrong.
Right. And the ideas that survive that tough process are our best current understanding, but they're always, provisional, open to being overturned.
Got it. Makes sense. What's number 3?
Strand 3 is computation. This builds on Alan Turing's amazing work, the universal Turing machine.
The theoretical computer that can simulate any other computer.
That's the one. But Deutsch adds his own Turing principle. Essentially, he says anything that can be computed is physically possible to bring about. And he argues the ultimate form of this is quantum computation.
Okay, so we're linking abstract computation theory directly to physical reality. Interesting. And the 4th strand?
The 4th is evolution. Darwin, obviously, but also Richard Dawkins and his ideas about replicators.
Genes, right.
Genes, yes, but also memes, those units of cultural information that spread, like ideas or tunes. It explains how complexity arises, life, knowledge, culture.
Okay, so quantum physics and the multiverse. Popper's epistemology of how knowledge grows, computation linked to physical possibility, and evolution generating complexity. That's quite a mix.
It is. And Deutsch's central thesis, the big idea, is that these aren't separate things. They're deeply interconnected. They support each other.
How so?
He argues that when you see them together, they form this incredibly coherent explanatory framework. So coherent, he suggests it might already be the first theory of everything.
Wow. Not just a theory of physics, but of everything. Knowledge, life, computation, the whole shebang.
That's the claim. It's ambitious, to say the least.
Okay. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore those connections, see how he builds this unified picture. Sounds like fascinating territory.
Absolutely. Let's start then with that first strand, quantum physics, and dive into why Deutsch is so convinced about the multiverse. He uses quantum interference as the main argument.
Ah, right. In his chapter Shadows, he tackles things like the double slit experiment, where single particles seem to interfere with themselves like they went through both slits at once.
Exactly. It's famously weird. And Deutsch says, look, if you take quantum theory seriously as a description of reality, the only way this interference makes sense is if parallel universes exist.
How does that work?
The particle you detect in our universe, the tangible one, has shadow counterparts in other universes.
Shadow particles.
Yeah, each taking a different path, maybe going through the other slit, for example. And these shadow particles interact subtly with our tangible one. That interaction causes the interference pattern.
So those light and dark bands on the screen, they're literally the result of particles from other universes bumping into ours.
That's the argument. It sounds wild, I know. But for Deutsch, it's not just a cool story. It's the unavoidable consequence of the math, the only real explanation. And leaning on Popper, he says if it's our best explanation, we have to take it seriously.
He talks about particles being grouped into these universes that are mostly separate.
Right, mostly parallel, but capable of this subtle interference. And every particle here has counterparts out there. It's just vast.
A colossal idea.
And what's interesting is detecting this interference needs an interaction involving all the particles that differ between the universes involved.
Which is why we usually only see it at the quantum level.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to coordinate bigger things.
Pretty much. But those tiny quantum effects, for Deutsch, are like little windows into this massive multiverse.
Okay, mine's slightly blown already. So the multiverse from quantum physics is pillar 1. Let's move to pillar 2, Popper's epistemology, problem solving through explanations.
Right. Deutsch sees Popper's ideas not just as, like, the scientific method, but as the fundamental way all knowledge grows.
How does he frame it?
It starts with a problem. Then we create conjectures, bold explanatory guesses.
Okay.
Then comes the crucial part. Ruthless criticism and testing. You actively try to find flaws to falsify the conjecture.
It's about seeking out errors, not confirming biases.
Exactly. The explanations that survive this process are our best current knowledge. But, crucially, they're never proven true in some absolute sense. They're just the best we have so far.
And he contrasts this with inductivism, the idea of just gathering observations and generalizing.
Yeah, he really pushes back against that. He thinks it's logically flawed and that real progress comes from creative explanation, not just observation.
And explanation is more important than just prediction.
Absolutely. He makes that point very strongly.
Yeah.
You could predict perfectly, but if you don't understand why it works, it's not real knowledge. That ties into scientific realism, the idea our theories actually describe reality, they aren't just useful fictions.
And he talks about explanations being hard to vary. What does that mean?
It means a good explanation is tightly constrained by the facts, like a key fitting a complex lock. If you change the explanation even slightly, it just doesn't work anymore. It's not easily fudged.
So it's robust because it's so specific.
Right. And he sees this whole process, conjecture and refutation, as deeply analogous to evolution. Conjectures are like variations.
And refutation is like natural selection.
Exactly. The bad ideas get weeded out. It suggests the process of knowledge creation is itself a kind of evolutionary process fundamental to the universe.
Wow. Okay, the connections are starting to show. So we have the multiverse. We have a way to understand it through this evolutionary process of knowledge. What about deciding what's actually real in the first place?
Yes, the criteria for reality, Chapter 4. He tackles that big philosophical question. And his core idea sounds simple, but it's profound. If something can kick back, it exists.
Kick back, meaning?
Meaning it resists our will. It behaves independently, complexly, in ways that require a complex explanation, other than just, I imagined it. If it just mirrored your thoughts, that would be simple. Reality is stubborn.
It pushes back.
Precisely. And he adds another idea. Computational cost.
Right. If simulating the illusion of something would take an enormous amount of computation,
then it's actually simpler, more likely that the thing is just real. It's kind of Occam's razor applied to complexity.
And he uses this to argue against solipsism, the idea that only my mind is real.
Yeah. He admits you can't disprove solipsism definitively, but he argues it's a terrible explanation. It's vastly more complex to imagine some super process simulating this intricate, consistent world just for you.
Than it is to just accept that there's an external reality that kicks back.
Exactly. The external world hypothesis is simpler and much more powerful. So, for Deutsch, what's real isn't just what we directly see, it's what our best explanations tell us must exist.
So if our best physics points to a multiverse, we should accept the multiverse is real. If biology points to genes, genes are real.
That's the idea. Explanation dictates reality.
Okay. And that leads him, maybe surprisingly, to virtual reality as a fundamental concept.
Yes, Chapter 5, virtual reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about VR headsets, though that's part of it. He takes it much deeper.
How so?
His argument is that all our perception, all our reasoning, is fundamentally a form of virtual reality.
Meaning?
Our minds don't get direct access to the raw world out there. Instead, our brains build an internal model, the simulation, based on sensory input.
Okay.
It's that internal model, that simulation, that we actually experience and interact with. It's our interface with the world. Think about a vivid dream. Your mind is generating a whole reality internally.
So our conscious experience is a kind of virtual reality generated by the brain.
That's the idea. Even simple organisms process information to build a basic model of their surroundings to act on. That's a rudimentary form of VR for Deutsch.
And then he talks about a universal virtual reality generator.
Yeah, this is a theoretical concept. A machine, possible according to the laws of physics, that could simulate any physically possible environment.
And this links back to computation.
Exactly. Its possibility stems from his Turing principle, that link between what's computable and what's physically possible. The ultimate limits on what VR can simulate are the laws of physics themselves.
So VR isn't just tech, it's fundamental to experience, and its ultimate potential is tied to physics and computation, which brings us neatly to strand 3, computation.
Right. Chapter 6 digs into Turing's universal Turing machine.
The machine that can simulate any other.
Yes, and Deutsch's Turing principle, that a universal VR generator can simulate any physically possible environment, which implies the laws of physics themselves must support universal computation.
Meaning the universe itself is, in some sense, a universal computer.
Or at least that physical systems, like our brains, are examples of universal computers. This universality is key. It's why we can even understand the universe, because one physical system, our brain, can, in principle, model any other physical system.
But he also acknowledges limits to computation, right? It's not all powerful.
He does, but his main focus is on the vast possibilities physics allows. And then he makes a big move. He says the theory of computation is now fundamentally the quantum theory of computation.
Ah, moving beyond classical bits to qubits.
Exactly. Centered on the universal quantum computer. This is where he really starts weaving computation back into quantum physics and the multiverse.
Because quantum computers operate differently, using superposition and entanglement.
Right. A qubit isn't just 0 or 1, it can be both at once, in superposition. This opens up vastly more computational power. He sees the Turing principle as a physical law, embedding computation right into the fabric of reality.
So computation isn't just abstract math, it's a physical process.
Precisely. Governed by physical laws.
Mm-hmm.
And this becomes super clear when we look at quantum computers, which he gets into later. But first, he actually pauses to hammer home his point about knowledge again.
How does he do that?
Chapter 7 is this imagined dialogue, a conversation about justification. It's him arguing with a crypto-inductivist.
What's the point he's making?
He's attacking justificationism. The whole philosophical quest for absolute certainty, for proving our beliefs are true.
The Popperian view, again, knowledge doesn't need or have absolute foundations.
Exactly. He argues trying to justify knowledge leads to an infinite regress, what justifies the justification, and so on. He uses the dialogue to slam induction again and really champion bold explanations and criticism over seeking certainty or relying on probabilities like Bayesianism.
So reinforcing that focus on explanation and error correction, not proof.
Right. And with that reinforced, he brings in the fourth strand, evolution.
Chapter 8, the significance of life. This is where Darwin and Dawkins come in.
Yes. He talks about genes as the biological replicators, the things that copy themselves.
Okay.
But then he extends the idea to memes, units of culture, ideas, tunes, habits that replicate through minds.
Like an idea going viral.
Sort of, yeah. He sees meme evolution as analogous to Popperian epistemology, too. Ideas compete. The fitter ones spread. And he frames knowledge itself, whether it's in genes or minds, as a physical thing with real effects. Information that causes itself to be copied.
And then he asks about the significance of life in this vast universe or multiverse.
Right. It looks like we're just a tiny speck. But Deutsch argues that's wrong, especially in the multiverse context. Life, and particularly knowledge-creating thought, becomes hugely significant.
How?
Because knowledge allows us to understand and manipulate our environment. Our actions, guided by knowledge, can create correlations, complex structures that ripple across many universes. He suggests life and thought have actually created the most complex structures in the multiverse.
Whoa. So far from insignificant, knowledge creators are major players on the multiversal stage.
That's his perspective. It's a powerful counter to cosmic pessimism. And this idea of knowledge shaping reality brings us back to computation's power, specifically quantum computation in Chapter 9.
Okay, so now he's really tying quantum physics and computation together.
Yes. This is crucial. He argues the incredible power we expect from quantum computers comes directly from harnessing the parallelism of the multiverse.
Meaning,
When a quantum computer calculates, it's effectively running parts of the computation in parallel universes. These different versions of the computer interact via quantum interference.
saying collaborate to produce the answer in our universe.
That's the claim. So if a quantum computer solves a problem way faster than any classical computer could,
It's because it's using the resources of other universes.
according to Deutsch, yes. It's an astonishing idea. And for him, it's strong evidence that the multiverse is physically real. Where else could that computational power come from?
So it's not just a theoretical possibility, it's something we could potentially build and use, demonstrating the multiverse exists.
Exactly. It connects abstract theory to potential technology and fundamental reality. He even contrasts it with classical chaos, saying quantum parallelism is source of power, not just unpredictability.
Wow. Okay. So quantum computers are like multiverse engines. Now, with physics, epistemology, computation, and evolution linked, where does mathematics fit in?
Chapter 10, The Nature of Mathematics. He offers a very physicalist view. He argues against Platonism, the idea of a separate, abstract realm of math.
And against formalism, the idea that it's just manipulating symbols according to rules.
Right. He says mathematical knowledge is ultimately about the properties of things that can exist or happen in physical reality. What computations are possible.
So mathematical proof itself is a kind of physical process, a computation performed by our physical brains.
That's the idea. Our ability to do math comes from our brains being computers.
Yeah.
And he brings in Gödel's incompleteness theorems.
To show that even math doesn't have that absolute certainty or completeness people thought it did.
Precisely. So by grounding math and physical computation, he pulls it into his unified worldview. It's not separate. It's about the abstract structures within physical reality.
Okay, that makes sense in his framework. Now, from the abstract to something that feels very fundamental, time. How does he view time?
Chapter 11. This is another really counterintuitive one. He argues, quote, other times are special cases of other universes.
Okay, unpack that. What does that mean?
He throws out our intuitive idea of time as a river flowing from past to future. Instead, picture the multiverse as static, a vast collection of timeless snapshots, different parallel universes.
Static, not evolving.
The collection itself is static. Our experience of time passing is just our consciousness tracing a path through this huge lattice of universes, experiencing slightly different snapshots, different universes in sequence.
Like flipping through the pages of a cosmic flipbook, where each page is a whole universe.
That's a decent analogy. The past and future aren't places we move along a single line. They are just other universes that exist alongside ours in this multiverse structure. Time is emergent from moving between these universes.
That's radically different.
It is, and it's key to how he thinks about time travel in the next chapter.
Right, chapter 12. If different times are different universes, then time travel isn't moving along one timeline.
It's moving between parallel universes that resemble our past or future.
And that solves the paradoxes, like the grandfather paradox.
He argues it does. If you go back in time and, say, prevent your grandparents from meeting, you're doing it in a different universe. You haven't changed your own past because you've just arrived in a parallel reality. Your own universe of origin remains unaffected.
So paradoxes dissolve because you're just hopping between branches of the multiverse.
That's the idea. He also mentions his own research applying quantum mechanics to these scenarios, closed time-like curves, showing they can be self-consistent within quantum theory. So for Deutsch, time travel isn't logically impossible, it's potentially physically possible within the quantum multiverse.
Wow. So the possibility of time travel actually reinforces the multiverse idea for him.
Seems so. It all ties back together.
Which leads us to the big synthesis, right? Chapter 13, the 4 strands.
Exactly. This is where he explicitly pulls it all together. Quantum physics, epistemology, computation, evolution. He spills out how interconnected they are, how they mutually support each other, forming this single, unified explanatory structure.
And he criticizes scientists for using these theories in isolation.
Yeah, he pushes back against treating, say, quantum mechanics just as a tool for calculation without grappling with its ontological implications, like the multiverse. He's really urging us to take our best explanations seriously, accept their consequences for our worldview, even the weird ones.
And he brings back the role of knowledge creators, us.
Yes, emphasizing that through thought and knowledge, we're not just passive observers. Our ideas and actions have reach. They have significance across the multiverse.
So this chapter is the grand statement. These four threads weave the fabric of reality.
That's the core message. And then in the final chapter, he pushes things into really speculative territory.
Chapter 14, the ends of the universe. This is where the omega point comes in.
Yes, he discusses Frank Tipler's omega point theory. It's this idea about the far future, especially if the universe eventually collapses back in on itself.
What's the theory proposed?
Tipler suggested that intelligent life could eventually gain control over all matter and energy, guiding the collapse towards a final singularity, the omega point, which would have literally infinite computational capacity.
Infinite computation, what would that allow?
Well, theoretically, it could simulate all possible realities, maybe even resurrect everyone who ever lived by simulating them perfectly within this final computation. It's extremely speculative, obviously.
Extremely. How does Deutsch present it?
He presents it in the book as a kind of ultimate, though highly speculative, endpoint implied by his worldview, showing the potential power of knowledge and universal computation taken to their absolute limit. He has expressed some doubts about it since writing the book, but here it serves as this mind-stretching example of where these ideas could lead. Life and thought potentially shaping the end of the cosmos itself.
Not just fading away, but becoming computationally infinite.
Potentially. It shows the scale of his thinking.
Okay. So we've gone on quite a journey there. From quantum weirdness and parallel worlds.
Through how knowledge grows, what makes something real, the nature of computation in VR.
The significance of life, quantum computers, math, time travel, all woven together. It's a lot to digest.
It really is. But if we try to, boil down the key takeaways.
Okay, let's try. The multiverse seems necessary from quantum physics, explaining things like interference via shadow particles.
Popper's epistemology knowledge grows via conjecture and refutation. Explanation trumps prediction.
Reality means it can kick back, and simulating it would be incredibly complex, so the external world is likely real.
Virtual reality is fundamental to how we perceive things, and maybe universal computation allows for any environment to be simulated.
The Turing principle connects computation to physics, especially quantum computation.
Life and knowledge aren't insignificant. They're major players, especially across the multiverse.
Quantum computers could be proof of and tools for using the multiverse's parallelism.
Math is grounded in physical computation.
Time isn't flowing, it's movement through a static multiverse of snapshots.
Time travel might be possible as travel between these parallel universes.
And crucially, all these strands connect, demanding we take our best explanations seriously.
Right. And maybe even point towards a future of near-infinite computational power, however speculative that might be.
It's a truly radical, deeply interconnected picture of reality he paints.
It really is. And it leaves you thinking. Considering Deutsch's arguments, how might this idea of a vast branching multiverse where maybe countless versions of you are making different choices,
Yeah.
how might that change how you think about the consequences of your decisions right here, right now, or just the sheer potential for different realities?
That's definitely a provocative thought to leave things on. Lots to mull over there.
Absolutely.
And look, if these ideas have grabbed you, if your curiosity is sparked, we really do encourage you to pick up David Deutsch's The Fabric of Reality itself.
Be warned, it's a challenging read for sure.
Oh, yeah. But it's also incredibly rewarding, a deep, deep dive into some of the biggest questions we can ask about existence.